Easy answers are a sweet poison. You are here for the dangerous truth. This is Questions Have Power. I am the curator. You have been granted access to the scholarly sanctum. Here, you are not a viewer. You are a juror. Weigh the evidence. Prepare your verdict. I will return to interrogate the silence before the record is sealed. The investigation is open.
Within the scholarly sanctum, Case MT-16.28 is subpoenaed for clinical exhumation. The inquest is open. The conflict is presence versus expiration. Juror. The High Tribunal of the Scholarly Sanctum warns you, do not utilize a synthetic safety of the metaphor to numb the reality of your own inexorable biological cessation. You are not a witness to the prophecy. You are subpoenaed to the eschatological liminality. Juror Lachlan MacLeish in Edinburgh, Scotland, has submitted a formal requisition of evidence. The inquiry asks, did Jesus lie when he said, "Some of you won't die before the kingdom comes"? If the Matthew chapter 16, verse 28 protocol establishes a strict biological perimeter for the advent, does the total clinical expiration of the original audience signify a prophetic failure, or does the text conceal a jurisdictional shift that tradition has failed to audit? Dr. Finch, the High Tribunal of the Scholarly Sanctum demands you judicially harmonize the biological expiration of the original witnesses with the statutory durability of the Nazarene's eschatological presence coordinate. Substantiate the "some standing here" mandate without utilizing sacerdotal mystery as a jurisdictional refuge.
Juror. The record demands you distinguish between a temporal expiration and a structural revelation. I impeach the motive of the secular redactor, whose subtractive agenda constitutes an act of methodological violence. If you accept this audit, the juror accepts the total ontological collapse of the divine framework. I identify the prophecy as a sacerdotal blueprint. Do not mistake a visionary calibration for a jurisdictional revocation. I direct your attention to the Philological Weapon. Asset Alpha exhumes the identifier, "some standing here." The record identifies a specific biological cohort, but the predicate is the glory. I deconstruct this glory via the Ugaritic cognate, KBD, signifying terminal weight. Interrogate the text's clinical silence of the unselected witnesses. The author of the record suppresses the witness's expiration to protect the ocular conquest. The fulfillment occurs within the 6-day perimeter of the Transfiguration. Peter, James, and John saw the Son of Man in the glory of the deity before the biological cessation. Dr. Vance's position commands a seductive, lethal plausibility. If the juror accepts this biological minimalism, we are forced to conclude that the maker is a hostage to human mortality. Only the juror's interpretation has expired. Juror, if the maker provides a 6-day alibi for the inner circle, does the eschatological breach indict the text, or does the inquiry merely expose your own methodological cowardice? Dr. Vance, if the biological clock is the only metric, why is the record pregnant with the geometry of the vision? Choose your heresy, juror, the fraud of the lie, or the terror of the abdication. Acknowledge the blueprint, render your verdict for presence, or become an accomplice to the biological erasure.
Dr. Vance, the High Tribunal of the Scholarly Sanctum mandates the peremptory requisition of the ancestral record. Debride the ontological masonry within the canonical superstructure. Reconcile the somatic insolvency of the first-century perimeter with the statutory imminence of the Advent, without utilizing the sanctuary of the metaphor as a jurisdictional refuge.
Dr. Finch, you call the phenomenon a visionary preview. I prosecute the vision as a clinical cover-up. If the Transfiguration satisfies the mandate, Jesus utilized a tactical perjury to extract an unearned devotion. This logic forces a systemic trap. Either Jesus engineered a fraudulent expectation to maintain morale, or Jesus is a hostage to a failed timeline. I deconstruct the coming as a jurisdictional hoax. Is Jesus a deceiver or a casualty of time? Observe the Sickle of Implication. Acid Omega displays a soot-stained first-century ossuary, the skeletal vault of the original cohort. I identify this anatomical treason as a somatic perjury. If the witnesses are dust, your presence is a structural fiction. Interrogate the silence of the grave. I prosecute the void as a terminal breach. Did Jesus intentionally abandon the first-century timeline, or is the author of the record a hostage to organic failure? Juror, I interrogate the adoption of the Canaanite Cloud Rider as a tactical theft of authority. By utilizing this motif, Jesus attempted to mask a failed temporal timeline with borrowed mythological stature. I prosecute this metabolic heist as an autopsy of silence. Did Jesus utilize pagan imagery to hide a structural fracture, or is the author of the record merely a hostage to a stolen pedigree? If the world remains a graveyard, the protocol is a fraudulent inducement. Alistair, if the author of the record utilizes your Transfiguration Alibi to obfuscate a 2,000-year silence, I subpoena Jesus as an augur of insolvency. I dissect the masquerade. Did Jesus employ a statutory fraud to maintain devotion, or is Jesus a pawn to an ancestral void? Choose your heresy, juror. Jesus as a source of intentional misdirection or a prophet of clinical failure. I certify the verdict of expiration as the only reclamation of reality.
The advocates have rested. The inquiry interrogates the systemic fractures. The High Tribunal of the Scholarly Sanctum consigns forensic custody of the record to the curator for the forensic profile.
Juror, we must execute a clinical autopsy of the silence. Why does the 1611 Authorized King James Version maintain a statutory reticence regarding the final member of the Some Standing Here cohort? If the biological expiration of the witnesses is total, does the design interrogate a clinical restoration or a terminal trap? Does your own attraction to this anomaly demonstrate critical inquiry, or is it the execution of the Ophidian Protocol? Juror, we must ask, is your modern hope a forensic reclamation, or are you merely an active accomplice in the redacted concealment of a terminal breach? If Jesus' clock stopped in the 1st century, what attribute of Jesus are you willing to sacrifice to stay safe?
The forensic profile is entered into the record. I affirm that this proceeding within the scholarly sanctum has been conducted with uncompromising forensic rigor. Juror, the inquest is sealed. Render your judgment on the evidence. Silence is an abdication of your duty to the record. The verdict on the decree, presence, or expiration. The foundational evidentiary sources are sequestered within the case file infrastructure of the digital record to facilitate your perpetual forensic investigation. The record is now sealed. Juror, proceed to the deliberation room below. Render your judgment. This case file is permanently open for your deliberation.